Hello dear World of Warcraft friends, welcome back to a new video on my channel. Today we're talking about a really big leak, which has actually been floating around the internet for 2 or 3 months now, but so far it feels like no one has really picked it up, and it's about Sargeras, a former Titan whom we last saw in World of Warcraft Legion. He is supposed to make his comeback with World of Warcraft The Last Titan, but in a completely different way than we have imagined so far, and apparently not as our enemy, but as a Lightforged version, as an ally. The whole thing is based on supposedly real screenshots. We'll take a look at what that's all about in this video. And I'd say, let's get started right away. If you like my videos and want to support me, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for getting me to 37,700. We're marching towards 38,000, and yeah, with that, let's get started. The last time we saw anything from the Titans was here in World of Warcraft Legion with this cinematic after finishing the Antorus raid. Here we see the Pantheon of the Titans and Illidan as they ultimately combine their powers, and here we see Sargeras, who wanted to destroy Azeroth at the end. And because of that, we still have that huge sword stuck in the planet, which could maybe be used again in the last Titan. But what we do know is that Sargeras has been imprisoned since that moment, and Illidan ended up staying there to guard him. By the way, it's also cool how that little spaceship just flies by at the last moment. Here we see the whole thing again. Like Illidan said that he would stay there, and yeah, with that, Sargeras as a huge threat to Azeroth was history for now. And as I already mentioned, in the last Titan, he is supposedly going to return, but like I said, not as a villain. And that's where this screenshot comes into play, where, of course, we have to say again, we don't know if it's real or not. What we see here at this point, it looks like the whole thing is taking place in the seat of the Pantheon. We see this grass here. That's what's always in the Blizzard cinematics on the PTR, whatever it is. So that's how it is on the PTR as long as the cinematics aren't final. There's always this red cross in between and work in progress. But as I said, it really looks a lot like that's the seat of the Pantheon. Especially with the chairs that we have there in the background. And that's also something that's very, very interesting. Up front, it looks like one of the Titans is lying there defeated. And let's take a look at that. This is what the seat of the Pantheon looked like in the Antorus raid. We had Argus in the middle here. And you can see it here. That's this chair back, and they all had this white glowing dot above it, just like we see here. So it really, really looks like that's where it is. And we just saw that Sargeras was basically sucked onto one of those seats that was empty before. He was basically imprisoned there, and Illidan agreed to guard him. Now we see here that a figure is lying on the ground, apparently struck down. And it also looks like some kind of purple liquid is leaking out here. Although I'm not sure if my eyes are deceiving me. But if you take a look, and the color of the clothing is kind of, well, blue with this golden yellow trim here on the sleeve. And that really, really looks a lot like Aman'Thul. That's the guy who sits here in the middle of the Pantheon. Accordingly, one could now assume that Sargeras returns and has turned against the Pantheon. And here's where an interesting story comes into play. Theoretically, it would even make sense for Sargeras to join us in the fight against the Void. Because I found a reel that summarizes the whole thing pretty well. I'm not that deep into the lore either, but ultimately the reason Sargeras lost it back then and resorted to these measures was that he saw what the Void can do to worlds, to unborn titans. That scared him, and he just wanted to destroy everything before the Void could claim it for itself. That's why Sargeras used the Burning Legion. And that's why Sargeras was never a servant of the Void. In fact, just like us, he fought against the Void. However, not exactly in the friendliest way. So this reel also says, yeah, in theory it would make sense for Sargeras to join us in the fight against the Void. But, and this is the crucial point, but Sargeras would never kneel. Not before the Titans, not before the Void. So he wouldn't do that voluntarily. And here's where the point comes in. He wouldn't kneel before the light either. But what if, in the end, the light simply claimed him? And that's where, for example, this cinematic comes into play again. That was also back in Legion. Here we see the Prime Naru Zera. And she kept talking about a prophecy the whole time, which ultimately pointed to, or according to her, that Illidan was supposed to be the chosen one. I think he was called the Child of Light. And we see that here throughout this trailer. Illidan basically said, nope, I'm not doing that, so I'm not going along with that. Zera says here, your true potential lies ahead of you, let go of your form, and so on and so forth. Illidan was supposed to embrace the power of the light, and in the end, she wanted to force him to do it. So, the light is capable of forcing its will even on someone who doesn't actually want it. And in the end, it only didn't happen because Illidan, as we see here, snapped while in the light's grasp. And then he just comes in and completely blasts Zera away. Which being would be powerful enough in the end? I mean, if Illidan manages to break free from this grasp and blast away a Prime Naru, which being would then be strong enough to impose the will of the light on Sargeras? That's a whole different story. But even here, theoretically, it would be possible in some way, yes. Personally, I find it a very, very interesting speculation. Let's wait and see what it's all about in the end. And of course, that would also mean if we see Sargeras again, we'll most likely see Illidan again as well. Because then he wouldn't be an Antorus anymore, but I don't know. Whether he's dead then, or chasing after Sargeras, or if he joins us, we will see. What do you think about this rumor and this leak? The whole thing was published on many Discord servers about 2 or 3 months ago, and is supposed to come from internal tests at Blizzard. As always, you should take all of this with a grain of salt, but I find the speculation quite interesting at this point. Yes, now it's your turn. What do you think about it? Feel free to write it in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Have a good time and take care.